Okay, guys, in your kit to pick up is some watercolor paper, and you got this board. It's just a piece of cardboard, kind of heavy cardboard. Makes noises like that. If you were making a movie, it could be your be a sound for thunder. Anyway, you've got that, and the reason I'm giving you that is so that you can tape down your watercolor paper. Now, one of the main reasons we tape down watercolor paper is because when you're painting with watercolor, the paper will tend, as it dries, it will tend to curl up. So that's why you tape it down. But we're going to tape it down, and we're going to section it off because you're going to be doing different techniques. Now you also have a piece of plastic wrap. I'll be using that. You have the tape to tape it down. I did not have enough crayons for everybody, and I did not have enough oil pastels for everybody. So some of you have oil pastels and some of you have crayons. So I think they should both work as a resist, which is one of the things we're gonna do. Now what's not in your kit is salt. I'm hoping that you have some salt at your house and you can use your own salt. All right, so the first thing I want you to do with this one piece of watercolor paper and your board is to go ahead and tape it down with the tape. I'm trying to find the edge. This is kind of cheap tape. It's not the best, but it'll do the trick. You just got to be careful. Sometimes when you rip it off, it tends to split, which there it is. See, it's split. So that's a hassle, but we'll work with it. We'll work with it. We'll still get by. So I'm going to tape down. I want to tape it down so it stays in place. I wish I did have a little bit better tape, but this will work. We will make it work. So I'm going to tape it down. Just on the edges. I like to tape it on the corner because the corners will, if you don't get the corners, they'll curl up when the paper gets wet as it dries. If the tape was good, I'd be taping it all the way around so I'd have a nice edge when I was done with this project, but that's all right. This project that we're getting ready to do is not a actual painting. This project is see, that tape is already messing up here. This project is a project for techniques. This is what you get to see what the techniques look like before you actually do a painting. So I'm finding that now. I lost my edge. I lost the edge. There it is. I'm probably going to make a couple different videos, probably 2 for this, and put them together because some of this I want to dry before I do the second part. So I'm going to make some of this video tonight and some of it tomorrow night. here's the part where I really wish this tape would not mess up, because what I want you to do, I want you to section it off into half and then 8. So a total of 8. So we're going to have 4 this way and then 2 this way. They don't have to be perfect. You don't have to measure. Just kind of eyeball it. I am going to try to get this tape to where it won't splinter on me, though. I want to get a good edge. Ooh, look, I'm doing good, I'm doing good. So I'm going to go in half first. Like I said, it doesn't have to be perfect. Don't worry about measuring it. Just kind of eyeball it. I think that went crooked, but it doesn't matter. It does not matter. We don't have to be perfect. All right, now I'm going to do 1 1/2 here. Ooh, it's getting better as I'm getting down in the tape. So half right here. And then half right here, half of that. So we're going to do some of those techniques that they showed on those videos that we were looking at on Monday or on Tuesday. And half there. All right, so I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. All right. Now what I want you to do is I want you to take a pen or a pencil, it doesn't matter, it really doesn't matter. And I want you to do, we're gonna do a graded wash. Graded. Graded wash. Variegated wash. I always forget how to spell it. I think there's an E in it. Variegated wash. I think I spelled that wrong. There's an E right there, I-E. Variegated wash. We're gonna do, I'm trying to remember which order I wanna do. We're gonna do a salt technique. We're gonna do the plastic wrap. We're gonna do a resist with the crayon or the oil. So I'm gonna call it a resist. We're gonna do the block out with the tape. So I'm gonna call it a block out. Or yeah, block out with tape. Let's see, what else? I'm trying to remember because I can't remember what I want us to do. Well, let's start with those. I know I'll remember as I go along. So, a graded wash. I'm gonna do that right now. I'm gonna start with that. Now, a wash just wet. That's what it is. Wet on wet and wet on dry. Oh man, wet on wet and wet on dry. Now these two are most common. They're what you've already done probably in middle school and in grade school. So that's them are the easiest. These others are a little bit techniques that you may not be experienced with. Now you may have done a graded wash without realizing it. So let's start with the graded wash. So when you do a graded wash, you're going to start up here with more paint and it's going to come down lighter. So there's a trick to it. Now some people will wet it first. You don't have to, but you can, but you don't have to. And then, because when you do wet on wet, you wet it first, so I'll be showing you that too. I'm just going to do, and you always want water, you want a brush, and of course you guys are limited to the brush. Unless you got your own brushes, you're limited to the brush that came in the watercolor pack. So I'm going to take my brush and I'm going to choose a color. It doesn't matter what color. I'm going to choose blue. So I want to load my brush up with a lot of paint. With a lot of paint. I don't want a lot of water on it right now. I don't want it to be real watery because I want to go darker up here. So I'm going to paint up here. And then you see how I'm painting sideways? I think one of the videos that we watched yesterday showed that. Now when I'm coming down, then no, as I come down, there's less paint on my brush. So it is getting lighter. And then I'm going to come over here to the water. Also, when you guys paint, when you watercolor, you always want to have some paper towels with you. If you don't have paper towels at home, if you can just get an old washcloth that your folks will let you use. But you always want to be able to control the water when you paint. Now I'm just coming in here with my brush in the water. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to come up here and I'm going to get some of that paint. And I'm just going to keep coming down. So it's going to get lighter as I come down. A little bit of water and come down. Now see it? It's darker and it gets lighter. That's a graded wash. Okay? And I can come up here, and this is what they were called glazing when you go over it with layers. So I could do, if I wanted to, I could add a little bit of different color to it and come up here. Let's get some red. And I'm still going to come down. So I'm doing the same thing. Add a little bit of water. Now you don't want to do this too much because this watercolor will start beading on you. Because it's not the really expensive watercolor. Paper makes a difference when you're painting. Professional painters, they use real expensive watercolor paper. I don't know if you've ever went to an art store, but watercolor paper could get real expensive. So we're just using a student grade. So we have to be mindful of that, and it will bead. The more we work on the paper, the more it'll tear up. Okay, so there's my graded wash. Now a variegated wash is the same thing, but we're going to change colors and we're going to blend them in. So I'm gonna start with blue. It doesn't matter what you start with, but I'm going to start with blue. And I'm going to come here. And then I'm going to go ahead and add the red now, right here. I think I want to stay with the red. Because when you're painting, and I know we talked about it, when you mix complementary colors, it makes a brown. Well, if I were to take this red, and if I were to add green, it's going to be brown, it's going to be icky. But I could come back here and get maybe some purple and add there. Ooh, I kind of like that. So there's my variegated wash. And it's when you do this, you do it to where you don't see a harsh line, you don't see a hard edge. You see it's a soft edge. It just kind of bleeds into each other. That's a good term too, bleed. I'll be really showing you bleed when we do the wet on wet. So there's your graded wash. It goes dark to light. Variegated wash just means that those colors blend into each other without a harsh line. Now, the term glazing, that's when you just go over it again. I do want that to dry before I go over it again. But glazing is when you layer on top of paint that's already been there. Okay, so now we're going to do this salt technique. Now with this one, and it doesn't matter what colors you use. You could use a mixture. I might come in here, let's see, let's put some, but it's real important that the paint be wet. So you do have to be kind of fast with this, because you don't want the paint to dry. If the paint dries, the salt won't work. So I'm gonna kind of be fast at this so that you guys can see the effect. Let's see, I'm staying, don't ask me why, I'm just staying with that blue and red purple. Okay, so the paint, like I said, it's got to be wet. It's real important that it stays wet. And then I'm going to take this salt and I'm just going to drip it on there. Oh, see what it does? See? And then we're going to leave that salt there till it dries. But you can already see it working. It beads up. So we're going to let that dry. Now, if the water if the paint kind of dried before you got you could do this, you could kind of dabble some water on that salt. That salt will kind of dissolve a little bit. I don't want to do that too much. I'm going to leave that like that. Now, this plastic wrap, same thing. It's got to stay wet. The paint's got to stay wet for this. Let's do, I like the plastic wrap effect, especially if we're doing like a landscape. Maybe like, I don't know, so I'm going to use some brown because I want you to see the effect afterwards. I really want you to see what this is going to look like. So I'm going to use brown and black for this one. And here again, I want it to stay wet. I don't have to be as fast as I was with the salt, but you'll see. I want this to be more brown. I don't like to use a lot of black when I'm doing watercolor, because black it's so dark, it's so dominating that if you use black and then you decide you don't like it, you're kind of stuck with it. Now, one thing, and I'm going to show you here too, and this is like the lift off. Now, I don't even have one for lift off, but I know the one you could take anything. So if you get too much paint somewhere, you can always just take like a cotton ball or a paper towel or a Kleenex even, and if you go like this, just kind of dip it and see how it comes up. So that in itself is an effect, is something that you can do with watercolor. But right now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this is why I gave you this plastic wrap. You don't have to use the whole thing. You can take a pair of scissors and cut just a small piece so that you could save some of it for later, which I want you to. Don't use it all right now. So just get some of it and put it on a section, and you want it to be kind of crinkly. You want it to be crinkly. In fact, I'm going to take it and I'm going to do this. And I like I said, I want it to be crinkly, but I'm going to lay it down. I'm going to press it, and then I'm going to keep it there till it dries, and then I'll pick it up. So I'm going to let that dry so that you can see that, what that's going to look like. Ew, I might put some down here too. So I know it's going to look really cool. It could be like an, I don't know, if you're doing like an animal and you wanted it to have spots, if you're doing a landscape, you want it to look rocky, this is a good rocky technique to make it look rocky. Well, you'll see. I'm using some weird terms here. You'll see. So I'm gonna let that dry. Okay. Now, the resist, what you're gonna do there is you can take a crayon. If you've got a white crayon, I'm gonna try a white crayon, and I'm also gonna take a white oil pastel just to see which one looks good. Like I said, you either got one of these in your pack or you got the crayons in your pack. I'm gonna take this white oil pastel and see how this works. The difference, we'll see what the difference is. So I'm just gonna kind of, I'm just making some lines, and I'm gonna also do it with the crayon, so we'll see which one works the best. The crayon's harder to see. Oops, oh, I just broke my crayon, I pressed too hard. Okay, so now, and here you can do any colors. I don't care what you do either, on this one either too. I just want you to try it out. And you're just gonna, oh look, the oil pastel works really good. Look at that, you see that? Oh yeah. That's cool. Look at that. And see the crayon? The crayon does real good too. So either one, that's a resist, because they're waxy. Well, the oil pastel is oily, and the crayon is waxy because they're one's oily and one's waxy. What it is they resist the paint. There, so there's your resist. All right, now the tape is the same, kind of the same. So, but because we're working with crayon and oil, now there is with watercolor, there is you can buy like a resist that will come off for you, but we don't have that. That's really expensive too. So, but here's tape. You could do this with tape. So you could take little pieces of this tape, and you could come up with some really cool patterns. You could make a pattern. So, like I said, I'm gonna have to do this in a couple. I'm gonna have to make a couple. I'm gonna have to make 2 videos because this paint has to dry for me to show you the end of it. Oh, I lost the end of the tape again. There we go. So I'm gonna try to do this. And I'll do one coming a couple the other way. Just do one. Let's do one. Let me come on, we'll finish that. But you could cut your tape in smaller pieces. You can actually cut it smaller pieces. Take some scissors and cut right in half so you get little thin lines you can do. You don't have to be, I'm doing it this way for quickness, but you could like cut that in half like that and have little tiny pieces. You could. Maybe I'll do a tiny piece right here. Do a little thin piece. So you could actually create something, a little picture with your tape. Use the tape as a drawing tool to draw something. All right, so I've got that. So now you're gonna paint. You just paint, just any color again. I don't care. Let's do green. I'm gonna do green this time. This is St. Patrick's Day is coming up. So we'll do green. Green for St. Patty's Day. I'm Irish. My maiden name is McGuire, a very Irish name. I could do different colors if I wanted, but I stayed with that. You know what? I might just to make it a blue-green in some of these spots. Needs to be different. Now let's do that right here too. Kind of like checker. Plaid, almost like a plaid maybe. Okay, so now I'm gonna let that dry. Now, wet on wet. You get some really cool things, and this is where that word bleed really comes in. Look at that salt. You can see that crystallizing? Look at it. It's gonna be cool. It's gonna be cool. Okay, so let's do something psychedelic. So wet on wet means you wet your paper first. You wet it first. Okay, so I'm gonna take my brush. It's got water on it. Got lots of water. I'm getting that good and wet. Good, wet. Okay, so it's wet. So now I come in here and I get some paint. There again, I don't care what color. Look at it. Look at that. Isn't that cool? You can really do some cool things when it's wet on wet. Look at this. Oh, it's cool. And then come in here. You watch your colors. Now, if you're going to do red, you want to stay either in the warm, you want to stay red and orange, or you can go blue and purple. You don't want to do red and green. You don't want to do those complementary colors together, because then it'll, watch this. Oh, it's so cool. It's just really cool. It's fun. Man, and I'm telling you, I think painting is therapeutic. If you're feeling down, or if you're bored, if you're sad, just start painting. And you could just, you don't have to paint anything, just paint. Sometimes just painting itself makes you feel better. Oh, isn't that cool? So that's wet on wet. See how that bleeds? And then watch, I can do this. Ooh. Let it run into each other. Oh, cool. So there's your wet on wet. Now, wet on dry is just what it sounds like, wet on dry. Now, when I do wet on dry, that means I'm trying to paint something and I don't want it to bleed. I don't want it to be messy. So I'm going to paint with not as much water in my brush when I paint, so that I can paint something. So I don't know what I want to paint. Let's paint a tree. Now when these dry, which I'll show you next time, you like to, when you're painting a painting, you usually paint a wash and then you go over it when it's dry and paint pictures on it on top of your wash. Right now I'm just going to paint on dry. And I'll just paint, and this is, I'm really awkward because of this camera. I can't paint very well. I'm gonna move it, and I know I'm gonna come out of the camera a little bit, but I need to get my hand over here. I'll just paint. But if you notice, when you paint on dry, see, when you paint on wet, it bleeds. When you paint on dry, you can get some really nice thin lines. You don't want a lot of water in your brush when you're trying to paint on dry, because if there's a lot of water, then it's real watery and it won't look the same. In fact, I'll do some. I'm just painting it. You can paint anything you want. It doesn't matter for this. I'm going to give you points no matter what you paint, as long as you're doing the techniques. This is all this is for. Just practice the techniques. Or, you know, if you're good, you've already done this and you know the techniques, then just, you know, have at it. And I still need you to do it so I can see it for points. And if you haven't done it, good, you're learning. Now, paper towel, you'll always want to be able to control your paint, the water. This is the secret of watercolor, is controlling the water that's in your brush. That is the secret to watercolor painting. So now I'm going to come in here. Now, that brown is still kind of wet. Now, I should let it dry first, but I'm not, for the sake of time. Now, see, what happens is if it's not dry, the brown will mix. Oh, it looks like it's not mixed. It's not doing too bad. So I'm gonna paint some leaves. So I'm just gonna do this. I'm gonna go real fast. I'm just, there again, say time. I'm just trying to be real fast. Now, the problem with, and I'm gonna explain it to you, if you're doing a painting, when you're doing a painting, which you guys will be doing some paintings, when you're doing a painting, you really want to do the wash first, because now I can't go in there and paint a blue sky in between this tree. It'll be too hard. I can, but I'm going to be worried about getting the blue over the green. So I'm just going to do this. Now, when I do leaves, I like to come in here and get some other colors, and I'll do this. So blue and green. You know, because leaves they're not just one color. Well, I might even add some yellow to it. Or how many leaves I want on this. How much I want on this tree. Some blue. Anybody can do this. Anybody can do this, guys. You don't have to be an artist to do what I'm doing right here. You see how I'm just doing that? Anybody can do this. Any of you guys can do this. I know you can. And you don't have to be an artist to do this. This is easy. Now, another thing I want to talk to you guys, when you start painting, this up here, especially if you want to mix colors, this tray, you can use it as a palette to make different colors. So let's say you've got a green and a blue, but you want a blue-green. Well, take your blue up here. Get some of this green. And see, I got blue in my green. Take some of this green and come up here. And see, now I've made a blue-green. See that? So now I've made a blue-green. Which I kind of did on there anyway, but so that's what this part, and you can wash this off with water. You get a wet rag, and just, you know, get your paper towel wet. It wasn't wet, but my paint was wet, and you can clean that off. Another thing is, especially the yellow always tends to get dirty, and I will see students, they'll come in a classroom, especially when you're sharing your supplies and you have to grab something that somebody else has already been using, and you see that and you're like, ooh, I don't want that one, I want a clean one, and they won't use it. But this is how you clean watercolors. You just take a brush, get some water on there. You can do it with a paper towel too, but I'm gonna do it with this brush. So get that wet. Then take your paper towel and just wipe it out, and then you'll get clean yellow. Then you'll have a clean yellow. So that's how you clean your watercolors. Okay, so now I'm gonna let this dry, and then tomorrow after school, I'm gonna come down here and finish this video. So I will finish the video tomorrow. Okay, I am back. It is the next day. This is all dry. So now we get to see what it's gonna look like. I'm gonna pull this plastic up. Oh, look at that. Look at that, see? See that texture that made? Oh, and look where the salt was. That is really cool. Now, and here's how the tape works. Now that I did that, I pull the tape up. And then and there. See, that's how that works. Now, another thing when you're painting pictures, like I said, you always want to do a wash first before you do something like a tree, because now I can come in here and now I could paint another tree or whatever I want to on top of here. Now I don't want to use a lot of water because I'm painting on top, and watercolor is transparent. Remember that. That is a term you need to know. Transparent. Watercolor is transparent. That means it's see-through. And if there's a lot of water in it, it makes it even more see-through. So there is not a lot of water on here. You got to get a little water. You can't get paint on there. But you don't need a lot of water. I don't usually like to use a lot of black, but just because I'm painting over it. So you can see it better too. It could be a spooky tree. There. That is what I wanted to show you guys. And this is what I want you to do. This is, you might say, your first assignment, your first watercolor assignment. Hopefully you've picked up your kits, because you've got to do this on watercolor paper. You cannot do this in your sketchbooks on that copy paper. You just can't do watercolor on copy paper. It's too thin. And you just can't do it. It tears up. So you've got to have this paper to do this assignment. So hopefully you can get it.